Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of various things. I'm working on a suspense novel right now called Pattern of Lies, and if you go out to my website, you will be able to click on some serials which I have just started. The first one is nothing to do with mystery. It is strictly for fun, called Skittles, the feline colonists to Mars, all told from a cat's point of view, which means, of course, I'm talking about Garfield in space. And with that, today with me is
Meredith Tate, author of speculative YA and new adult, and my first novel, Missing Pieces, comes out on March 3rd.
Brad R. Cook. I write mostly steampunk and a bunch of other stuff too. But my novel Iron Horseman is out there. Please check it out. And I actually just finished reading Missing Pieces. It was awesome. So check that out coming this year.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My first self-published picture book is for sale on Amazon. It's called Dog Park. Search Dog Park and my name, and you'll find it.
It is also really
lots
good.
of pretty illustrations.
It is pretty.
And the dogs are based on real dogs.
Yeah, they're my dogs.
I'm Fedora Amos, writer of Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Jennifer, who created a most brilliant and beautiful picture of my heroine, Jemima McBustle, sometimes known as Jimmy McBustle, and it's just adorable. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Christmas is a magical time.
I'm Melanie Planey, writer of sci-fi, fantasy, and nonfiction, and I can't think of anything amusing to say.
Oh well, but we will talk about something that's not super amusing, but it's a topic you find lots of articles and they never really quite go into it because it's really a hard topic to talk about. So I'm choosing to talk about, which is the elusive voice. I don't know about anybody out there in the internet land, but I've always been told, yes, you need to find your voice when you write. Okay, so where's the magic yellow brick road to find this voice?
Sadly, there is no magic yellow brick road to your voice.
But it is your problem and the reason I'm not publishing your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, talk to me about voice. Anybody?
Well, I think it's elusive because it is the one thing that differentiates you from everyone else in the world who writes anything.
Yeah.
And it is the one thing that is likely to sell you to someone else, such as a publisher or agent, because they're looking for the same old, same old. I mean, let's face it, there are only a few real plots in the world. There's supposed to be, 7 romance plots in the world? Mm-hmm. And less than 100 altogether. Mm-hmm. But yet, how many books are out there? Millions of nonfiction books. What is the real difference amongst them? And the thing that is the great selling point, it is having a, quote, distinctive voice.
So how do you go about getting it? Go ahead, Brett. You're going to say something.
I was just going to throw out, for people who have no idea what we're talking about in terms of voice.
Yes, let's establish it
first.
The easiest way to throw it out is, and Fedora did a great job explaining it, actually. But the point is that every author out there, if you think of J.K. Rowling, she has a beautiful way of kind of telling narrative and a beautiful way of description. If you think about, Shakespeare is probably the most obvious voice out there. He had a beautiful voice. In fact, I think it needs to be spoken and not read. But, that's kind of what we're talking about. You can read the work and distinguish the author without even knowing who wrote it. And once you can do that, if you think about it, Tom Clancy is incredibly, dialogue descriptive. He's got a lot of quick, fast dialogue that kind of runs through. He's got some of the great military descriptions, and he just uses the technical knowledge like crazy.
Great dialogue with popular science.
Exactly.
Basically.
So if you think about it, each writer kind of has these things, these little, idiosyncrasies that we put into our writing, that becomes your voice. So,
And there's narrative voice and character voice, and they're two different things.
yes.
And
Well,
great.
character's voice is something different, and if you're writing in the first person, then your character's voice and your voice will merge a bit, but it's still your style of writing. Like, you can still spot your style. It might be that you like short sentences. It might be that you like really long, purpley sentences. But however that falls down, that ends up being your voice. So, probably the best description of voice.
I was just thinking for a contrast that people might recognize. Jane Austen. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. That's all one sentence. Mm-hmm. Compare that with Hemingway, Old Man in the Sea. His first sentence, my name is Ishmael. And again, no.
That's Moby Dick.
That's Moby Dick.
Hey, at least I got the right author.
Nope. Hemingway didn't write that.
Melville wrote that.
Sorry, Melville. Sorry.
She was doing so good.
Yeah, well.
And
I was impressed by your ability to quote.
Austin.
Yeah, Austin is
The
good
thing
job.
about Austin is I had the books on audio and listened to them going to sleep, especially when I had migraines. So, especially at the beginning, I remember.
We forgive you.
But
No worries.
the others I read because I was forced to in high school. But point is, Hemingway and Melville, I believe, I could be wrong about Hemingway, both had much more journalistic styles.
Hemingway was pure journalistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even Melville, the style was much less flowery, more declarative sentences, shorter. The rhythm was very different.
Well, he's coming out of the late 1800s writers, which is your Verne and Melville and Stoker and all those guys. So they're coming out of the Victorian age of writing.
Right.
And then you have the flip to the Lost Generation, which is where Hemingway comes in. And you have all the guys who ran off to Paris and did all the great writing out there. The ones who drank all the absinthe and had all the fun.
This is all building up to two questions I'm holding up. I know. After you're done, I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to throw these two questions out.
Oh, go ahead. That was pretty much it.
Well, voice impinges upon every one of the basic skills of writing. Dialogue, it's going to be different for every writer. The setting, the tone are most obvious parts which impinge upon the voice. But everything does. The plot, your ability with words and to craft pictures in words, your imagery, even the time that you're writing in, all of that impinges upon voice. So that any one of these things can make it significantly different from everybody else's voice in the world, and that's what you're striving for.
An example, practical example from one of the Missouri Writers Guild slush pile readings. I wish I could tell you which agent said this, but it was a panel of agents that were reading the slush pile, which is the first couple pages of unpublished novels that people are hoping to submit to them, many of which we're going to pitch to them the next day, which is a little unnerving when they shoot down your pages in the slush pile and then you sit down in front of them 12 hours later. But there was great advice. I always remember this. It stuck with me, and it helped me craft my voice. Someone submitted an unpublished work, and the first couple pages took place in a graveyard. And the graveyard was described beautifully with the stones and the way the sky was overcast and lavender and the tree branches rustling together and everything sounding like dry bones and leaves on the ground. Then we found out that the protagonists were 6-year-olds. And the agent goes, wait. This was gorgeous, but if your protagonists are 6-year-olds, you should probably be describing it in a different voice, because the voice has to do with who's telling the story. So the 6-year-olds would say, it was creepy, there were bugs, I see things at about waist level, because I'm short. I'm thinking about, I don't really know what death is yet. I have a loose concept of it. Perhaps I'm exploring graves, thinking about how fun it would be to be a zombie or something. But that sort of note helped inform me when I was writing, because I was thinking about not how beautifully can I set the scene, but how would my protagonist see the scene and use that to kind of craft the voice. If my protagonist is too worried about what's going on inside her, then she's not going to be observing the beautiful way the the trees are flowering in spring and how the sky is turning an immaculate cerulean as it rolls over the hills. No, she's going to be looking down. She's going to be thinking internally. She's going to be noting stuff that reflects her mood.
Well, I've now got 3 questions.
I was going to tag onto that's actually a great example of voice versus not voice, because as she's saying, if you're in a character, like, the easiest way to say this is if you're writing in first person. So if you're writing in first person, then everything Jen just talked about holds true. But if you're writing I was about to say, if you're writing in third, well, it's really easy to do if you're writing in first, because you're entirely in the mindset of your character. Mm-hmm. But if you're writing in third person, you have to maintain that.
Yeah,
you have to maintain that. Yeah.
Was a third person.
Yeah.
So.
But it's really important to remember that voice isn't, voice is about character, but it's also about the writer.
So, and I'm going to let you go with that. Let me go ask you, just to clarify, borrowing from Shakespeare, especially like Henry V, another one, there's a character called Chorus.
Yes.
His whole role is to narrate the parts in which the audience would not normally see.
Yeah, we don't get that character anymore. Bummer.
I know. But would you say then that if you're writing it in third person, that character who's telling the story, the narrator, is your version of Chorus?
Most definitely. It's a little bit more veiled in the sense that you don't literally have a guy who comes out on stage and, tells you the next part of the plot and sets you up as a transition from one scene to the next. Kind of wish we could. It'd be really easy to do, but we have to kind of build it in more and find ways to transition as opposed to just having a character step out and go, and now we are moved to grander locale.
Sometimes we have that kind of character as Watson for Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, you can have that. You can have the narrator character, which is a fun character to have.
To be fair, Sherlock Holmes needed a Watson to explain him to him.
Oh, yes.
I was just thinking a really good example of a book that I thought had great voice was Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. And the reason why we were talking about first person and third person, that book is actually told from 3 different perspectives. First person of an adult woman present, and third person of her mother and her teenage son in the past, or teenage brother in the past. And it's interesting because it goes back and forth between the third person past and the first person present, but all 3 voices are incredibly different. And even though the third person voice, because obviously it's Gillian Flynn narrating, are similar, she still managed to get those voices different. So I think that book is a really good example of that done well.
Ooh. I have another good example of a good use of voice. The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. She writes from the point of view of 4 different people. And they change chapters and they tell you who's narrating at the top of each chapter, and it's all in first person, but every single character is so distinct and different that you feel like you're experiencing the same events from 4 different lifetimes.
Like Tennessee Williams, not Tennessee Williams, wrong person. I just pulled what you did a second. William Faulkner's
Sound and the Fury?
No. It was a short story. The shortest sentence, or shortest part of it, chapter if you want to call it, was "My mom's now a fish." Oh, as I lie dying.
I hated that book.
I didn't say I'm a fan.
Flashbacks of junior year of high school. Ugh.
I didn't say I was a fan of it. Question. I've been holding on to a couple questions. I want to toss this out. Melanie, you talked about Hemingway a little while ago. That made me think of this question. Hemingway followed the Kansas City Star's writer guidelines as he wrote. Is really your voice based on in your personal chosen guidelines of writing, or is it something else?
No, I'd say voice is different because you know what? 1,000 people are going to read those guidelines and they're all going to write, but each one of them is going to write differently, and that's voice.
Hopefully they're going to write differently.
Good point.
Yeah.
Just thinking of going off of that, I remember specifically an assignment that we got in 10th grade, and it was chemistry, and it was about how we shouldn't plagiarize each other, and she put a whole group of just random beakers and stuff in the front of the room and told us all to write a paragraph about what we saw on the table. And then she had everyone read theirs to the class, and the whole point was that out of 20 people in the class looking at the exact same thing, everyone wrote something in 3 sentences that was completely different. And I think that's kind of also an example of what voice is.
St. Louis Writers Guild does a contest every year, the Young Writers Awards, and we give out the first sentence. This year it happened to be Something Strange Escaped the Zoo. and then we ask the kids to write the next 500 words. And I am always amazed. We get a couple hundred entries every year in that, and no two stories are even similar. They might all run in a similar vein. A lot of things escape the zoo this year.
A lot of tigers escaped the zoo.
A lot of tigers escaping the
and
zoo.
a lot of unicorns.
An alien?
Yeah.
Apes. Were there aliens? There was at least one.
I think there was an alien.
Yeah, it was an alien
Yeah.
thing.
But I think it was the human that escaped the zoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, there was that one that was an alien zoo.
Yeah.
That was
Yes,
a good one.
Yeah,
that's
So
a
yes.
good one.
But the whole point is that that kind of lends itself towards voice in the sense that we've already set them up. We've given them everything, a structure, and then we let them run with it. And even though they're going to run in a similar vein, it might be a pseudo horror story involving something escaping the zoo and attacking the good citizens of St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
But guess what? There were 3 or 4 stories that ran that vein. They were all different. They all had a different voice to them. Some of them were funny. Some of them were more serious. Some of them involved a giant gorilla suit. Others involved,
That was hilarious, yeah.
actual animals. So I think voice is incredibly personal, and I think out of that is where we can get the diversity of the millions of books that Fedora was mentioning, even though there are only 100 some odd plot lines.
So let me go off of that real fast because you just led right into the next question. How do you develop this voice? I mean, do I go take a class in high school, college, or read Writer's Digest? How do I develop this?
I would say some people like Shakespeare are probably born with it. If you notice, from pretty much day one, Shakespeare's writing in the style in which he was, going, which is kind of the style of the day. But the point is that some people I think are born with it. Other people have to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, it took probably 2 or 3 books for me to even realize what my voice was. And then out of that, to tailor it into something that people might actually say, oh, that's Brad's voice.
So you spend a lot of time writing and thus developing it.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
I think you gravitate toward it by what you read, largely. That is, what I like to read is mystery, especially humorous mystery. And so I read more and more of those books, and they help me develop what I hope is my voice, because I want to write what I want to read, for goodness sake. And I think every author does, but I think we're all attracted to different kinds of reading and different kinds of outlooks on the world, which change our voices.
I dare say that you acquire your voice when you become relaxed with writing. When you're confident in yourself and you write what is you, and you're not worried about making it sound a certain way, or if it's correct. That's a big thing. I think that's where a lot of voice lives, is when you kind of lose that fear of doing it wrong and you just do it your way.
Now,
Go ahead.
if you're writing multiple books, not one in the series, but for instance, especially if you're writing different types of books, would you say that a writer might either purposefully or just incidentally change their voice?
Well, I'm working on 2 novels. One's a third person with the protagonist is a 16-year-old girl in Fantasyland. The other one is a first person where the protagonist is a 6-year-old ghost in an old house. And they sound very different, but they both sound like me, because both stories have this sort of... it's weird to try and describe my own voice, because it just sounds like I'm talking. But it's a very kind of little tiny bit sarcastic, very observational kind of voice that I write.
I was going to throw out Michael Crichton. So Michael Crichton never really probably wrote the same book twice. Almost every single book he writes is a different genre, different something or other. I mean, if you go from like Eaters of the Dead to like Andromeda Strain to, any of the others, the point is that no matter what he was writing, if he was writing about Vikings or if he was writing about some sort of medical procedure in Here and Today, I still hear Michael Crichton. I still hear that beautiful way that he had of phrasing, his wonderful gift for dialogue and stuff like that. You see all that. You hear all that. That doesn't change no matter what he's writing about. So I would almost say your voice will carry through no matter what.
One of the things I wanted to throw in there, and first off, Jennifer proves that me writing 5 novels at once is not totally insane.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, I know. On a serious side, I kind of destroyed my voice a few years back when I worked on my master's degree, because I was made to write very formal and my relaxed voice kind of disappeared, and I've been regaining that. So I think sometimes what you write can cause you to change your voice occasionally. That's just my opinion, based on that experience, and I'm having to fight to get back to it. There's a lot of thrust, especially you'll see it on television. Use this dictation system, and you can talk in your own voice and write in your own voice that way. And in fact, one of the Right Pack who doesn't get to come that often is Peter Green. He does dictation. I've attempted it a couple times.
I have Dragon. I've used it.
I do too.
I have troubles with it, and
I can't do it either.
the program is beautiful. And if I'm writing in a very formal voice, it works for me. But when I'm trying to sit in here, let's say I'm telling you a story right now as I'm saying it here, I would literally have to commas, talk about, period, that whole break just throws me off. So that's just a me thing. Go ahead.
A friend of mine, Kelly Cochran, writes Aspen Moore mysteries. And she had this experience before she was published, or before, actually she self-published. But anyway, before she published it, she had been to a workshop which told her that you should make it lean as possible, cut out everything, all the adjectives, all the adverbs. And she did that, and then she read it again and said, I'm lost. There's no me in there anymore. And she put it all back. So you can't necessarily follow even the best advice of your critics or people who run workshops or whatever. You have to go with your gut and do what works for you.
It's probably a good exercise to go through and cut out all that stuff to see if it improves it.
And I'm going to do a quick plug. If you look back at our episode list, you'll just find one of our episodes talks about reviewing advice that is given out there. I forget the title. You'll have to look it up. The title makes it kind of obvious. But it talks about advice, filtering through it, and what works, what doesn't work, and understand that everybody's different. That's why this is an art, not a science.
Yeah.
But speaking of voice recognition, there was a time, I don't use it all that much right now. Once I get to a different stage of writing, I'll use it more. But a few years ago, I was using it a lot. And the thing is, voice recognition software, so for lack of a better word, it guesses what the word is based at least on part of what other words you've written. So the thing is, I had trained it to write fiction. So I tried to write a science paper in this, and it was a disaster.
Let me just throw up there with that. One of the stories in which I actually attempted to use it, I had to stop. I wrote what Melanie would call a drawer novel. It is called Hearn's Law, so Jen probably will recognize it.
I remember
I
it.
remember Herb's Law.
It was
You were around.
Yeah, I know you were. It was literally a space western, but in the culture, instead of like what we see in Firefly, which was America and China come together, Mexico had become a power, and this guy Hearn stood for Hernandez, and he would talk in Spanish. Now, it was completely weird, but I would throw out certain Spanish phrases, and that sent my recognition software going, wait a minute, are you talking to me in English, Spanish, or what? I don't understand. I'm having a breakdown.
I'm having like flashbacks to try and use the autocorrect on my phone. I have a friend.
That's exactly perfect description.
I have a friend who lives in Mexico. She's a good friend of mine, but her phone, of course, is trained to write in Spanish. So every time she texts me, she's instead of my, it always corrects it to muy. So she's always saying muy this, muy that.
More this.
Yes, it's like more lunch. Oh no, I was talking about my lunch.
More house.
Exactly. There's so much in Mexico.
So how did you know, unless Fedora, you had your hand up for just a second.
Oh, go ahead with what you're doing.
Okay, so how do you know you reached your voice? I mean, did you have a personal ha-ha moment, or how did you know it? Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, this is almost sad to admit, but when my book was in its final stages, when Iron Horseman was in its final stages, I finally realized I had a voice. I finally saw it.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, it was kind of nice to find. But yeah, it took. I guess it took seeing it in print. Actually, it kind of took other people reading it too, for me to really understand exactly what my voice was. But I think voice is something that it isn't an aha moment. It's probably something more garnered over years, and then one day you'll be like, oh, I have a voice.
I don't know if this applies to anyone else as well, but I realized I had a voice when I destroyed it. David said that he broke his voice. I broke mine a couple times listening to other people's advice and people telling me to, you need to take out every instance where a description, it's like, what does this have to do with that? Any sort of creativity I just completely obliterated out of my first chapter. And I'm reading through it. And the first chapter, of course, you work the most on because that's what you submit to people. I realized that my first chapter sounded flat and lifeless, but the rest of the book sounded like it had an energy to it. And that was because the rest of the book was in my voice, and the first chapter was not. So I went in and rewrote the first chapter from scratch to try and get that sort of spontaneity back, and that's what kind of taught me what my voice was.
And I would say, too, that I've been writing that way for years. I just didn't necessarily know that was my voice until I saw it all kind of gathered up together.
I will say, there are some writers, I'm not one of them, by the way, I'm not saying that I even know who they are, but they're capable of mimicking other people's voices. So, for instance, there are certain series that are written by multiple authors, different books, and sometimes it's like written by, you can tell if they're different books. In fact, that's more often than not true. You can tell, a different author wrote this book, even though it has the same name on it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes... no, you can't tell. Or maybe they merge or whatever.
I actually noticed that as a child. I read the Boxcar Children books ravenously, and at some point in the backlog, Gertrude Chandler Warner died, and her children took over. And as a kid, I'm like, this one sounds different than the other ones. And I found that I liked the newer stuff better because it had a more modern, younger person sound to it.
Our third question, but go ahead.
Yeah, that was with the Little House on the Prairie books. Mm-hmm. I don't know how popular this theory is, that Rose Wilder helped her mother write the books because they found some writing by Laura Ingalls Wilder from other sources that just sounds very different than the Little House books.
I was just saying, going off of kind of what Jen said about a book series all of a sudden being written by somebody different who was younger, giving it a younger voice, I can always tell if I'm reading a YA book written by someone older who might be a little bit more out of touch. Outdated slang is a big one. Just the character sounding like some ridiculous caricature of a teenager. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of something about voice, is to research.
Where you start recognizing characters from movies that just came
out.
Yes.
I think that's a separate problem, though.
Yeah, if you're going to write kids, please do some research.
Just hang out with some kids.
Have kids read your early drafts.
Yeah. That was actually the biggest compliment on my middle grade. I read it at an open mic, and some people came up to me and went, that sounds just like my 10-year-old. I was like, thank you.
Well, I want to expand upon something that Melanie said earlier, as what we've been talking about typically are the voices that are natural to us or that come out of us organically in some fashion or another. But also, it is possible, I think, for professional writers, and I'd say any professional writer, to write in a different voice. Take, for example, Shirley Kennett, who started her career writing rather gruesome thrillers, and then she morphed into traditional mysteries. And now, as Dakota Banks, she writes YA science fiction, and she did a pretty decent job of all of them. So I think it is definitely possible to alter your voice to suit the circumstances that you're going toward.
Definitely.
I'm trying to think of Charlene Harris?
No, Shirley Kennett.
I know, a different author, Charlene Harris.
Yes.
Her very first series was basically a cozy.
Oh, the librarian?
Yeah, the Aurora Teagarden series.
Yes.
And now she's known for True Blood, which is the TV adaptation
of Sookie Stackhouse.
Of the Sookie Stackhouse series. And I'm trying to, it's been a long time since I've read all of them. I'm not sure if her voice is different between the two books or developed throughout the books. I think in her case, they developed over time.
Right. It seems to be more serious and subdued in the first series and more way out there in nowhere in the Sookie Stackhouse books.
Jen?
I was going to bring an example from a different field of media. One of my favorite animated film directors, Satoshi Kon, may he rest in peace, he made what he considered to be pure like Japanese films. Like he tried to bring Japanese themes in. He purposefully made his characters look Japanese, where a lot of his contemporaries are trying to make their characters look vaguely
Caucasian,
European. Yeah. But he made a point that he wanted to make Japanese films for Japanese people. And for that reason, a lot of his stuff is hard to translate. Tokyo Godfathers, for example, still doesn't have a dub because localization, people said it's way better to have it in subtitles because you get that. And it's a brilliant movie, and y'all should look and see it. You should watch it at Christmas, except it's not Christmas anymore. But he made these movies for Japan, but his voice was not like his contemporaries because he spent his time watching American movies. Like Scarface and westernized adventure and action movies. That was the tone and the voice that he liked to write in, but he wanted to train it toward his whole Japanese theme thing, and that's what makes his voice so unique and special. You could tell a Satoshi Kon movie over anyone else's movie, like a Miyazaki movie.
Yep.
You can see a Miyazaki movie, the tone of a Miyazaki movie, that's his voice. Mm-hmm. Although it's a visual thing, so you can also see the art style, and that might distract. He does have a writing tone going on.
So there's an art style, there's a writing style, there's a very definite character style.
Themes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that. It takes me back to something I wanted to say back when Brad was talking about Michael Crichton. In case the audience out there who may not know this, he was also a screenplay writer, as well as a doctor. But he created the series ER. He wrote Westworld, and I believe the sequel, Future World, and some other ones. Now, Brad's trying not to crack up loudly over there, because they're campy for the time period, but yet...
There's some there.
It's still there. And if you think about it, just what Jen was just talking about is, that voice, okay, it's not what you're reading in a book, but that voice is still being carried out through the dialogue, and sometimes the descriptions are occurring in the story of the screenplay. Now,
even the cinematography decisions.
Well, I was going to say, we call it voice, but that's just a writing term. I mean, really, it's your style. I mean, you can look at, we all make fun of Michael Bay because he loves gigantic explosions.
And hot chicks.
Yeah, exactly. But that's Michael Bay's voice, if you want to call it that.
That's because he's a 12-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, you go into a Michael Bay movie, you're going to get Michael Bay, big boom, So, that's just the thing, and that's our style. And kind of that's what we're end up talking about here is style. How we all, put ourselves forward and out there.
Yeah, Michael Bay, he has his name on that Ninja Turtles movie that just came out. He didn't do anything to that movie, but they put his name on it because that was the kind of movie that was being made. Everyone knew exactly what they were going to get when they went to the Ninja Turtles movie because Michael Bay's name was on it. All he did was produce it. I mean, there was a different director, different cast and crew. I don't even know if he was on set. Didn't matter. Point is, it was in his tone.
But there were
it was in his
giant
voice.
explosions.
There were explosions and pop culture references and snide commentary and little boy humor.
Do you recommend it? I want to see it.
No. I recommend it for a rental for a bunch of friends to sit around, and if you drink, drinking's okay to do that.
You make a drinking game out of it?
You can totally make a drinking game out of it. It's kind of garbage, but it's in that it means well garbage where you can tease it the whole time.
so that takes me back. What you just said is perfect. With the whole Michael Bay and the aspect is, you said, and I'm going to try and quote you.
Okay.
Even though he didn't do anything with that movie, they would come to that movie because they knew what they were going to get with Michael Bay's name on it. And that's really what you're aiming for when you write, be it a screenplay, be it a novel, short story, whatever.
Well, how many different things has Neil Gaiman done?
Yes. Great
he
example
does
of
scripts, he does comic books, he does children's books, he does adult books, but
Doctor Who.
Neil Gaiman, you know exactly what you're going to get when you come to anything Neil Gaiman because
Good luck describing it.
Yeah, well, he has this slightly dark, humorous, very creative, sort of out-of-the-box kind of thing that he does.
And
And
if
you
you
know
haven't
that's what
read
you're
his
going
New
to
Year's
get.
resolution post, it is awesome.
Oh, I need to. Okay.
All writers go read it.
And
I need to
if
see it. I'll put
not to get religious here, but I'm not. But if various religions will tell you, oh, you need to have your daily readings. If you're a writer, find Neil Gaiman's graduation speech that he gave. That's your daily until you understand what he's saying to you.
Well, We've been talking mostly about basically the voice that carries from one book to another. Your maybe not your permanent voice, but the voice that your brand voice. When someone sees your name on a property, a book, this is what they're going to get. But what about character voice? Because, you know, a novel has many characters in it, and not all the characters are the same. And especially, for instance, if the book is from multiple points of view, all those characters, I mean, you're writing it so the whole book is in your voice, but each character needs to be distinct. So, for one thing, the reader doesn't get confused, but the other thing, so, you know.
Well, character voice is all about
Yeah.
the character, so you know, you have to make it true to the character. You have to keep it true to the character. You have to maintain exactly the way they would speak and the influences that they would use. You know, so in essence, you're finding the voice for each person in your book. Beyond that, you know, you're adding in yourself. So the way in which the way in which they speak dialogue will be a mix of their voice and your voice. The way in which the actions they take will be a mix of the way you write mixed in with the way they react.
Straight tie into what you said. One of the things which and when I broke my voice talking about earlier, I have a nasty habit of making all my characters sound alike. So, and it's not on purpose. I'm not sitting there trying to do it, but I do on purposely try to fix it. And what I find when I do, this is just an editing tip. If I do, if it works for you, fantastic. If it doesn't, but
Screw it.
yeah, I will read through my manuscript multiple times, just like everybody else does. But I will read through for the narrator's voice and just look at the narration. Forget the dialogue. Then I will look through, let's say my characters are people sitting around here. I will look through for Fedora's dialogue and try to fix Fedora's dialogue throughout the whole thing. And then I'll try to fix Brad's voice or Brad's dialogue throughout the entire thing. And go back and forth between each character, looking for where they
See,
talk.
I like that, except when
It's a lot of work.
when you're fixing Meredith's dialogue, she changes what she says, so then that affects what Brad says back to her.
No, that's it. It changes how she might say it. And yes, there's that possibility, but not necessarily the content of a dialogue.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, okay. And I was just saying, going off of that, there's lots of ways you can differentiate voice based on who the characters are. An older person and a younger person are going to sound way different.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, a male voice and a female voice can sound different. Regional dialect, for example, like from the Northeast, I say wicked instead of really. Don't know if anyone here would do that.
Instead of really?
But that,
Really? Wicked? You do that? No.
yeah. Like,
So
that's
if
wicked
I would
awesome,
say
but,
it's
like,
really cold out today, you'd say
say
it's wicked cold out.
And I've been called out by my CPs for saying that. They're like, this character sounds like they're from Boston. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. That's how I talk.
I would say that sounds British, because the only time I've heard wicked is in British movies.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, stuff like that, like regional dialect,
Yeah.
their education level, or even like use of contractions or slang, like that can be a
Yeah, I was watching
differentiated voice.
Lone Meyer, and there's Dave is this better than me, but there's a character on
Henry.
it, yeah, that he doesn't use any contractions. And it took me a little bit to pick up on that, but he never uses any contractions, and it changes. It makes him sound like it makes him sound much more formal.
Yeah,
Sounds like a robot.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny you said that, because when we sat there and watched it, it's Lou Diamond Phillips' character, Henry, and I like his character. He sounds like a cross between a Native American and Mr. Spock.
Someone who doesn't speak English first.
No, no. He's fine. His wording is fine, but if you think about the way Spock talked, very formal, even though Henry's character will show great emotion at times. I mean, you can see him busting out laughing. It still has that logical, non-emotional formal feel to it.
Well, speaking, not to go back to Japanese films suddenly,
Okay.
but the Japanese have a way, that's one of the many languages that have a formal version and an informal version of
Yes.
speaking, and that's somehow sometimes that's how English localization if they're a formal speaker, they'll remove stuff like contractions and slang to make them a little bit stodgier. Sometimes they just give them a British accent and consider that formal.
Yeah, I remember in high school,
Star Wars.
there was the person with the locker next to mine and the boyfriend, or maybe it was the girlfriend, I don't know who. Every third word out of their mouth was a curse word. That was their informal talk. And I would have trouble writing that way, but
Nothing
that's
wrong with
not
having a
an issue.
sailor's voice. You want to give him a sailor's voice?
Yeah.
Hard.
Pirate voice?
Pirate voice.
Well, I have a modest suggestion which might help. It might help Dave especially, so you don't have to go through the entire book for every character every time. And it is to really know the character at the outset. And that is to make a little bio for each character, giving that person's age, physical appearance, the kind of level of education the person has, any kind of quirks that person might have, that will give you guidance so that when you're living the scene in your head, which I assume everybody does, because I do, that may be wrong, but that's what I assume.
Nope.
That
You're crazy.
you
You heard it here first,
accept
Jen
that.
threw the gauntlet down.
No, I'm teasing. Everyone does that.
And so that you are thinking, okay, now I am this character and I am like this. And then talk to yourself and I am this character and I am like this.
Oh, another thing is just write the dialogue. Don't write all the other stuff if you're really in themes, because you can just get the dialogue down, then do the rest of it.
There's a method of animation that was pioneered by a Disney animator, because when you animate by hand, back in the day when everyone was using pencil and paper, you would have to draw every single line on every single page, and then they'd put it through a Xerox machine, and then that would be what goes to ink and paint. I mean, this is in like the dark age of Disney when they didn't have time to do stuff or any money at all. But they, one animator, I really wish I could remember his name. It was a great book. But he pioneered the idea of going through your first pass and just animating the parts that move. Like in his brain, he could see the whole figure, but he, trying to draw it all out on every single page was kind of killing his momentum and taking a lot of the elasticity out of his actions. So he would, let's say he's animating Pluto, he would draw Pluto on the first page and he'd draw all the keyframes out of the positions he wants to be in, but the in-betweens, the action moving toward those keyframes, he would go through and just do the eyes, or just do the feet, or just do this line to show you where his brain is putting things. You can translate that into writing the same way, that you can spend all time dwelling on the scenery or whatever, but if your tone is more of a conversational, lively, like dialogue-based one, go through and write down important parts, quote-unquote, that'll get the thing going. And then you can go in later and kind of wedge in other stuff.
Good question. Good suggestion. So, does anyone else have any suggestions for brand new writers, or writers who have been trying at it for a long time but are having trouble with their voice? What else? We've had a lot of good discussion here of what everybody does, but is there any corners we have failed to paint?
I would just say look for other people's voice. Find your favorite author, see what makes his voice. Don't copy it or necessarily anything like that, but by identifying voices, by identifying different voices, by identifying how authors do their particular way of writing, it'll help you figure out what is your way of writing.
I'd expand on that. Choose at least one author where you don't like the voice. Because, it might have a distinctive voice or not have a distinctive voice, but something you don't like, and try and figure out why you don't like it. And it could be you personally. It could be a great masterpiece, but you don't personally like it. Just,
And that's also a show of subjectivity.
Yes.
We've all had that.
Yep. It's funny that Brad suggested that. I'm reading now Luther, The Calling by Neil Cross. And this is after reading Twist by John Lutz. They're both thriller writers. Luther, this book is written by the creator of the television show on the BBC called Luther, which I love to death, that show. But Neil Cross's novel writing has some beautiful descriptions. I'm trying to figure out I would love to be able to incorporate some of the way he does. But he also throws me out of the book constantly. What he has done in his story, unlike John Lutz and a lot of other ones I read, John Lutz and company, that's most all us writers, write in past tense. He walked through the room or whatever. In this, it's written in present tense. If this was video, you could see Fedora's mouth drop and then start making mumbling sounds. And she's saying she's doing the same thing as I do as I'm listening to it. But yet there's elements of that description which are fantastically, I don't want to say beautiful because some of them are grisly, but they're well done. And I'm just like, that's the reason I keep reading it, but it's a hard read for me. So it's interesting that you're comparing. It's just that immediate jump back and forth, like, oh wow.
Yeah, the first time I read the first sort of present tense novel, because present tense has become kind of a bit of a trend recently.
Yeah.
The first present tense novel I ever read was The Hunger Games, and I had a hard time adjusting to that too because it wasn't what I was used to. But it worked for the book, and by the time I got to the third one, I was used to it, and it felt right for that tone and that voice.
See, I had forgotten it was present tense. I'm sure I noticed at the time, but
that's a good sign. I mean, it wasn't distracting for too very long if it fits.
And that is a part of the voice of those authors.
Exactly.
It makes it easier in some ways. If you're writing in present tense, then you have a flashback. That could be in a past tense.
Yeah, that's what kept jarring me, is that they would speak in past tense.
Yeah.
Because they're talking, about what happened in the past. So after a long sequence of dialogue, it would switch back to narration and be in present tense, and I'd go, whoa, whiplash.
Yeah. What about any other suggestions out there?
Well, I don't know that I have a suggestion, but just another comment that, of course, the voice is one of the main reasons why authors might have more than one pen name. Take, for example, J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter books. Well, everybody is going to expect anything else to be just like Harry Potter. But she wanted to write mysteries, and so she chose a different name for that.
And I'm glad you wrote
The
that.
publisher leaked it.
Yeah.
I thought
Actually, the publisher's
Actually,
lawyer's wife leaked it.
I really think the wife took it on, was the scapegoat there, but that's another issue.
Yeah, that's an issue.
That was all about
Probably
books,
planned by everybody.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think
it only sold a couple of
Let me-
thousand copies. They announced her name. It sold a couple 100,000 with that day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, see, I don't think she wanted it leaked, but I think everyone else did.
Yeah.
It was used.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and go right off of Fedora's discussion about pen names. Perfect example, at least in my opinion, is Earl Stanley Gardner. Now, I realize he's dead, and a lot of people may not know him by his name out there, but I still say the term Perry Mason. A lot of people in the world know who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote underneath his own name, Earl Stanley Gardner, which was Perry Mason. He wrote underneath A.A. Fair, which that was more of a common, if I remember my reading of his work, more comical of mysteries. He wrote some other ones too. They're just different. It's like each one was a different brand, and that's a different element of voice. That's where I'm going to go.
Yeah, Nora Roberts writes under a few pen names, and it's definitely branding. Everyone knows what her pen name. Well, not every. Well, her books are even published. Nora Roberts writing as so and so. So
Yeah, a lot of writers don't hide their pen names.
yeah. So I mean, not only is she not hiding her pen name, it's on the front cover of the book along with the pen name.
But back
Which doesn't make any sense.
No, it's a branding.
No,
thing.
it's a selling
really?
point.
Yeah.
It's a selling point.
It's
You're not going to buy a book by
her J.D.
by
Robb
an author
book
A.
is it's a different type of book than a Nora Roberts book. And anyone that buys a J.D. Robb book knows that they're getting a different book than
And
a Nora
Nora
Roberts
Roberts
book.
has such a reputation for being a kind of racy romance mystery thing. So it's
It's saying this is something different. Don't expect exactly the same.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
it's like
Yeah,
it's
it's one
written
of
by
these-
someone who knows what they're doing, but it's different.
Yeah, it's a very common way nowadays in the industry to brand something that doesn't follow the same audience, because your author name is tied to an audience.
Stephen King is another good example.
Yeah.
Is he
Yeah.
writing under pen names?
Oh, he's got like 6. He's got so many pen names it's not even funny. But yeah, and it's yet again it's a way of branding. So we've become our names become so tied to a particular genre of books that we write, and the audience follows that name. So if you're going to write something that the audience isn't there for, the audience you have built in isn't going to read that, you need to pick something new, because otherwise your audience is just going to be ticked off that the new Stephen King book has no horror in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of that, Charlene Harris, her Suki Stackhouse books are not mysteries. But guess what? The library, one of our local libraries shelves them in the mystery section with their other books. But
Do their research.
no, I think they know the mistake. They just keep doing it.
Well, that's because that's where all our
Sure.
they're putting all our
Books are.
books together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like the old days where you just be like Crichton, right? Whatever you felt like, just book Michael Crichton on it and you were done.
You know, Rise against them all.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
Yeah. Or can we? Oh.
Get to work on that, everyone.
That's what I'm
Become
doing.
famous enough.
Yeah, it's become famous
Name on
enough.
it. Everyone become Neil Gaiman.
No, we need Neil to be Neil. We can't duplicate.
No, but Neil is the guy who can. He's pretty much that guy of today who can
Yeah,
write
I
whatever
agree.
he wants. Slap Neil Gaiman on it. We'll all be like, yes, I will read this. And if he puts Amanda Palmer on it, I'll read it too.
So, any final thoughts on voice?
That's on voice.
Find yours, love it, and embrace it.
Don't let other people stomp on it just because it's different.
Make sure that all of your characters are different. And as I said, write a little bio for each.
And while you're, don't be afraid of it just because it's different. On the other hand, don't use it as an excuse not to make necessary edits. If someone wants to make the edits, at least make them and see how it sounds.
No, a bad one.
I would say just do a lot of reading, similar genres, and then you'll help develop your own voice that way, I guess. Practice.
A lot of times, writers are told in the beginning, emulate. I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, that's just me. But find your authentic self within what you're writing and stick with it. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the Write Pack for this week, and tune in next week for yet another adventure in writing industry. Have a good week writing. The Write Pack would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their bookstore. STL Books and Gifts is St. Louis's newest independent bookstore with an emphasis on fine literature for adults and children and the most comprehensive selection of St. Louis books available anywhere. Visit them online at stlbooks.com or in person at 100 West Jefferson Avenue, Kirkwood, Missouri 63122. Tune in next week as the Write Pack will conquer yet another pondering issue in the writing industry. Theme songs for Write Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.